Welcome, readers. This is Literally Books. My name is Virgil, and I'm joined by my co hosts, Dragon and Ari, and we're going to talk about books that we have in the queue to read that we're interested in and excited about. Since I've got it in front of me and I'm looking at it, one of the books that I'm interested in reading and kind of a little bit excited about reading is a collection of Avram Davidson's fiction, short fiction. He was a kind of a science fiction fantasy writer that I've read a couple of his stories before. I think he wrote mostly in the 70s and 80s, maybe a little bit into the 90s, but I want to say, I'm not sure when he passed away, but I think most of his work is in the 70s and 80s. And so it's kind of, you know, the little bit I've read, it's sort of humorous and kind of humorous fiction. The story I'm actually most interested in is sort of a Frankenstein's monster-esque story called The Golem that he did. That I'm kind of interested in reading that story. I've heard it, you know, recommended as a story to read if you're interested in sort of alternate takes on the monster. So that's kind of the story I'm most interested in, but just the book in general, I know is going to be good from stuff I've read of his before. So I'm just sort of anticipating getting to read that.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I always love a good uh, Frankenstein take or a monster book.
Well, I guess since you spoke up, you get to go next.
Okay, I'll be happy to share my one of my books. So the first one I'll share is a classic that I am excited to read. I did just start it this morning, so I'm kind of already cracking into it. Um, but it's Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. The reason why I'm really excited to kind of dig into this one, I've never read it before, and I've never read anything else by him either. So it's a whole new experience. I think like back in the day when I was in school, somebody must have done a report on this, and I've probably just didn't remember anything about it. The only thing that I remember that I know is that the narrator I've heard is the style of writing can be a little bit harder to read just because of the way that Salinger writes the main character. I know he wears like a red hunting cap. That's the only two things that I know about the story. But I'm excited because it's a classic. And I'm also excited because it's my understanding that this is kind of where a lot of like YA kind of originated from, having that young adult voice. So I'm excited to have something that is kind of the beginning part of that genre. I think it came out in did Catcher in the Rye come out in the 40s? Is that right? Um,
That sounds a little. Oh, is it that? Is it that early? Ooh, now you've got me interested. I don't. I think
copyright, copyright 1945.
really. I really didn't. Wow, I didn't really know that it was that early. Hmm. I guess it was. It must have been a real early book in his career. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. I am very interested in YA literature. And the reason being is that I'm kind of I find it interesting that with YA I've kind of written it off before now, and partly because I was like, oh, I don't need to be reading that. Like I've outgrown that. You know what I mean? But the thing is about YA when it's done well is that you'll have these young voices aren't restricted by their experiences. So they're still trying, it's still turbulent. They're still trying to figure things out. They're questioning things. They're not self censoring. If anything, they're trying to like break down their own walls and everything that they've learned from, you know, growing up or whatever. Like usually it's taking walls down versus having walls up, right? So, I think that that makes it interesting and why I think that you can kind of get some um, really insightful ideas from YA when it's done well. So I'm excited to read this because I think that it's going to be obviously it's a classic, so I know that will be well written and interesting, and even in a literary sense. So I'm really excited to kind of be exposed to J.D. Salinger and knowing more about his work. What's also really cool about this is that I didn't realize that Salinger, um, there you can't there's no like you can't make a movie from his books. Like there's no you can't do audiobooks from his stuff because of the copyright laws that he has on it. Um, it's not open source. It's not going like we will be in our like 80s or 90s when this will be open to the public for for us to.
For some other transformative media, yeah.
This is the only source. I have to read it if I want to take it in. So I got it now.
Right on. Huh, I didn't. That makes sense. I didn't know that.
I always I like as a rule I just avoid anything labeled classics. I'm like, nah, I don't need to read that. And but Catcher in the Rye specifically, I've heard that because it has that YA flair of being like angsty teenage boy, I've heard that it's pretty kind of difficult to like get through. Like you're like, oh, this guy's annoying or whatever. you know? But I really liked For Esme with Love, the short story by Salinger. So
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm excited.
yes.
I think it will be good. I sometimes I just love to hate a character too. So even if he's kind of
Yeah,
like not the greatest, I do love those characters that are kind of difficult to love. So
cool.
Right on. Yeah, I think it does. It has a reputation, a contentious reputation. It's sort of a love it or hate it, and it's kind of good that you're coming into it cold without a lot of preconceptions or without a bunch of people standing over you saying, "Oh man, I didn't like that book," or "Oh, I love that book." You just kind of like, "Well, I don't know. We'll just see what it is." And that's probably a good way to approach a book like that.
yeah,
Cool, cool.
I agree. I it's always disappointing when you're like excited about a book and then people are like, "Oh, I didn't really like that," and you're like, "Oh, well, I was really excited, and now I'm just going to be thinking about how you didn't like it."
Yeah, yeah,
Other people are always
right.
wrong.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Anyway, but yeah,
Cool.
Okay,
dragons.
well, I guess that means it's my turn. Yeah. Um, so I'm going to read Rod Duncan's The Queen of All Crows. It is the start of another trilogy. It's the trilogy is called The Map of Unknown Things. It is like a sequel trilogy to the previous trilogy, which was The Bullet Catcher's Daughter.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess actually that was the first book. I guess the whole trilogy is called The Fall of the Gaslit Empire, um, which is kind of confusing to me. Well, I better not get into that because point is, but so there was like the first trilogy called The Fall of the Gaslit Empire. I really loved it. Elizabeth Barnabas is the protagonist. She's like a woman who was raised by a stage magician, and she is a private detective. So she kind of uses a combination of like some of her illusion. It's not like real magic, but like illusion magic. And I've talked about this in a previous episode. So it like kind of crosses that line of like kind of Indiana Jones Tomb Raider esque kind of thing. It's Victorian gas lamp, but like to where there's no magic, right? Things are a little bit steampunky, but the steampunk is really downplayed. It's just like every once in a while, it's like, oh, there's a flying machine or something like that. And there's no magic per se, but then every once in a while it's like, oh well, here's this kind of like fantastic thing, and there will be like one kind of fantastic crazy steampunk borderline magic thing that happens in each book, kind of like Indiana Jones, where it's like, well, was that magic? What happened there? And anyway, I really loved the original trilogy, so I'm really excited to start the next trilogy, The Map of Unknown Things. And I don't really know much about it other than like obviously it's like a pseudo Victorian age, but it actually takes place in the 21st century. Like this book takes place in 2012, and apparently So this is kind of a spoiler for the original trilogy, but apparently Elizabeth Barnabas is now working as a spy for the patent office, which was like the evil organization that she running from
Oh
like
no.
throughout the whole first trilogy. Yeah. So
Hmm.
so I'm very excited to see where that goes. I've heard some things. I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but I guess the second book in this new trilogy is like not even from her perspective. Actually, it's like from some other character's perspective. Totally unrelated to her. So I'm kind of interested to see how that goes too.